Hey VCers, it's Matt. Adam, buddy, how are you out there? 180 subs or 181, I think it might be. Just wanted to congratulate you on that, and said the other day that you doing well, and hope that continues. But I wanted to check in on your 180 or 181 sub contest. Do an entry. I was actually going to do that this weekend, but I watched the video just an hour or so ago, and I couldn't stop. Just got me to thinking about, got to work making my list and figuring out my choices, and so I decided to go ahead and do it tonight. So the couple of times I've had a contest, I think you've been the first one to respond with a video both times. I don't know if I'm the first, but hopefully I'm one of the first. So yeah, Adam Lee, great channel. If you haven't checked him out or don't know about him, go over there and subscribe. He loves the 80s, so his contests, he's had a couple of contests that I know of, two of them that I've entered, one before and this one, and he was asking for your favorite uh, male singers or performers of the 80s, whether they're a solo artist or someone in a group. He had done one a few months back that was your favorite female singers or performers of the 80s. So I thought that'd be a fun thing to take part in. So, yeah, um, let's see here. A couple of things real quick. There are albums that came out in the 80s by Paul McCartney, The Who, the Rolling Stones, and the Kinks that I really liked. I'm not going to count those because I don't really consider any of those people to be 80s artists per se, even though they were active in the 80s. They're all what I would consider mainly 60s or mainly maybe 60s and 70s artists, even though when you think about it, McCartney's been active for what, 6 decades now, so kind of kind of amazing and scary at the same time. But so yeah, I mean, Tug of War by McCartney and McCartney 2 are two of my favorite of his solo album releases. Um, but I'm not going to count those. I actually like the two Who albums that came out in the 80s, Face Dances and It's Hard, the post Keith Moon albums. Most people don't rate these very high, but I kind of like them. So, but and the Kinks, of course, I'm in the middle of doing reviews of each and every Kinks album in chronological order. I'm up to, I think, 1973 now. I'll be doing one tomorrow on the Preservation Act 1 album is what I'm up to. So I'll get to those 80s albums by and by, and I'll talk about them at that time. Rolling Stones, I do like some of the stuff off of Tattoo You, well, Emotional Rescue and Tattoo You. Really don't like anything they did past that, but anyway, so yeah, so I'm not going to count those guys because they're not really what I consider 80s artists per se, like I said. The other thing about the 80s is that, in my opinion, they have one thing in common, at least one thing in common with the 60s, is that in both decades you had groups who had kind of careers, or who you got into or followed or got into their albums or followed their careers. But you also in both decades had a whole lot of, it was kind of both of them were kind of singles decades in a big way to me. You had a whole lot of one hit wonders, or maybe two or three hit wonders. A lot of bands that you loved a song of theirs that was a hit on the radio, and I went out and bought the 45, and for whatever reason I just never delved any further. I never went and bought their albums or followed them, and I think a lot of those bands were pretty short-lived anyway. But and you know, Our House by Madness comes to mind. The Commissar by After the Fire, Tainted Love by Soft Cell. Loved all those songs. Pretty in Pink by the Psychedelic Furs. Uh, Great example would be 8675309 by Tommy Two-Tone. One of my favorite songs of the 80s. One of my favorite songs, really just favorite song. Uh, they actually, I don't know, most people don't really seem to remember, but they had a hit a couple of years before. 8675309 was 1982. They had in, I think it was 1980 or 81, they had another song called Cheap Date that wasn't as big of a hit, but it got quite a bit of radio airplay. And I remember that one. It's kind of like that song. It's not as good as 867, but But yeah, I mean, and you got some Stop the World, Melt with You, or I Melt with You by Modern English. I had the 45 of that. I remember the flip side is a song called Memorabilia. I was trying to recall if I ever even flipped the record over and played that. I don't know. I know they had a couple of albums at least. I never heard anything else that they sang, so I'm not going to say one of those guys is my favorite singer because I don't even know who's in the band, to tell you the truth. I don't know their names or anything, but um, and actually they did Stop the World. They did a remake of that around '91 that was pretty bad and pointless, and I don't know why they bothered, but because the original's really great. But yeah, and then you had some Men at Work. They were big for a couple of years there. They had some hits, but Human League, I really enjoyed. Really loved Don't You Want Me, and I remember I bought a album size, but it was really an EP because I think there was only 5 songs on it, but it had Fascination and Mirror Man, and those were both great songs. But so I liked all those people, but I just bought the 45s, and I didn't really get into their whole look any further into their albums and so forth. So not really going to count them. I thought about Cheap Trick, but then I looked up and I thought Dream Police was from 1980. It actually came out in 1979, and I like their first 5 or whatever albums up between the first one and Dream Police, but those all came out in the 70s. And in 1980 was All Shook Up, their album that was produced by George Martin, the guy who produced all the Beatles stuff, which was an okay album, but not as good as the ones that came before it. And then I really don't like the stuff that they did afterwards, so I'm not going to count them because I consider them more of a 70s band. And what else? Well, the elephant in the room, I guess, Michael Jackson. I do love Billie Jean. It's a great song. I remember the Motown 25th anniversary show. That was one of the great moments in music when he did Billie Jean and he did the moonwalk across the whole stage and all that. I like Thriller, Beat It, several of the songs off of that album, and I like Off the Wall, but I think that's 1979. I should have checked, but I'm pretty sure that was a '79 release. So yeah, Thriller is. I don't like everything on there, but I do like several of the songs. But the thing about, I really don't care for anything that he did after Thriller. I wasn't crazy about Bad, and then the stuff that came after that, like Dangerous and whatever all came after, I didn't really like. So, truth be told, I really prefer the old Jackson 5 stuff, ABC and I Want You Back and those things, and some of his 70s work. So I'm not going to include him, even though he was obviously the biggest star of the 80s. I mean, I guess maybe you could argue between him, Madonna, Prince, and maybe Bruce Springsteen, but I think Michael Jackson was, I don't know, one of the biggest. But I did like some stuff off of Thriller, but I preferred his 70s stuff, so I'm not going to count him. So, who am I going to count? Well, this is in just no specific order, but I came up with 7 choices. First, we'll go with Prince, and I don't have any of the old Prince 80s albums anymore. I have no idea why I don't, but I don't. I've got a few things on CD of some of his later stuff. But so Prince, obviously, and favorite song would be really hard to pick, but I'm thinking maybe Let's Go Crazy, maybe Purple Rain, Little Red Corvette. I mean, you got to love that opening line. That, I guess I should have known by the way you park your car sideways that it wouldn't last. I mean, this is a great opening line. Let's Pretend We're Married, which is a kind of a lesser known song off 1999, and Controversy, the title track, is an incredible song. So Prince, obviously. Next we'll go, and like I said, these aren't in order. It's just as I thought of them and wrote them down. But next I've got Springsteen, and Joe, Mr. Mayo, did a video not too long ago, and he said he never really was a huge fan of Springsteen because songs all kind of sound the same to him, and I've heard that from a lot of people, and I get that to a certain point. but I like him, and he's I like him pretty well. I like the stuff up to Born in the USA. Tunnel of Love's okay, but much past that I don't really, not too interested in him. Even though he did do one other great album past Tunnel of Love, and that was the Seeger Sessions, where he did the old songs of Pete Seeger, I think it was, and that's an incredible album that you ought to check out if you like Springsteen and kind of lost interest in him after Born in the USA or Tunnel of Love. But I don't have Born in the USA anymore, but my favorite songs off of that would be probably my favorite Springsteen song is Bobby Jean, which was one of the songs that wasn't a huge hit off of that album. I mean, almost every song on there was a hit or got a lot of radio play, but that was one of the lesser known ones. It's just a personal thing. When I was going out with a girl named Becky, that was kind of one of our songs, and I don't really get into all that or not, but so it has personal meaning, but it's also a really great song, I think. But I'm on Fire. I love Dancing in the Dark. I like quite a bit. Downbound Train and Cover Me. Darlington County is kind of fun. I do have this. This is Nebraska, the album that came out before Born in the USA. This was what was this? 81, I believe. Maybe it was 82. It was 82. So yeah, which is just kind of a spare, stripped down acoustic album that he made in his recorded in his home, I think. But Atlantic City is one of my favorite Springsteen songs. Everything dies, baby, that's a fact, but maybe everything that dies someday comes back. Put your makeup on and make your hair up pretty and meet me tonight in Atlantic City. Love the lyrics to that. And there's some other good stuff on this album. And I know I'm supposed to probably only pick one song from each artist, but you know me, I kind of tend to ramble and go on. And this one is The River, 1980. This is a really great one. Ties That Bind, Sherry Darling. Hungry Heart was the big hit, which is okay. It's not a bad song, but Out in the Street, Crush on You, You Can Look But You Better Not Touch, I Want to Marry You, and The River is just great. I'm a Rocker, Point Blank, those are all good songs. I like Sherry Darling, where he's riding around with his girlfriend or wife, and the girl's mother's in the car, and he's saying, you know, tell your mom to shut up or she's going to be out walking down the street. That's a cool one. But yeah, favorite one on here, Crush on You or Out in the Street maybe. I like I Want to Marry You too. That's a good one. So Springsteen and Prince so far. We got what else we got? Yeah, let's get to these guys. Should have pulled these or separated these before I got started the video. Sound Effects, The Jam, Paul Weller. My third favorite album of all time. This came out in 1980. Jam started in the late 70s. First album came out in 77, so they had like 1, 2, 3, 4 albums in the 70s, and they really, in the 80s, this studio album in 80, and then studio album in 82, and then they broke up. But they also released this, which is a 5-song EP in 82, and this is another 5-song EP that they released in 82, and this was right after they broke up, I believe. This was a live album that came out, Dig the New Breed. So yeah, this is my third favorite group of all time and my third favorite album of all time. So many good songs by the Jam. I'll stick with, they had great songs in the 70s too, but I'll stick with the 80s. Monday, which was kind of another song that was one of ours for that girl I was just talking about, but still a great song in regardless of that. Start, Pretty Green, Dreamtime, Going Underground, their 1982 final album, Happy Together, Carnation, Town Called Malice. If you love the Beatles and the Who and the Kinks from the 60s, you'd love the Jam. If you don't already know about them and haven't checked them out. Bitterest Pill is an incredible song. Pity Poor Pity Poor Alfie and Fever, which is a cover of the old Peggy Lee song, but it's done really well. And of course, Beat Surrender is incredible. That was one of their #1 hits in England. They never were that big in America, but they had hits in England. And Shopping is a brilliant song too. So the Jam, Paul Weller was the lead singer in that band. It was a 3-piece band. So we got the Jam. Next up we got Dexys, Midnight Runners, another one of my favorite bands. Everybody knows Come On Eileen. I've talked about this band before, but they're kind of in the unfortunate position of Otis Redding, where there's a lot of people that know Dock of the Bay and don't know all the other incredible music he made. Come On Eileen was #1 hit all over the world. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people liked it back then, but they've heard it a bazillion times and they're sick of it now. It's a really good song, I think, but it's not completely representative of the band. It's kind of, I've said this before, if you'd never heard the Beatles and but you knew they were big and popular, and somebody played Yellow Submarine, you would be thinking like, okay, I don't really see what the big deal about this band is. But then if they played the rest of the stuff, you'd probably say, oh, okay, now I get it. Same with Come On Eileen. I like the song, but they have a lot more and a lot better than just that song. This is their first album. They actually, song on here named Geno, Geno. It's an incredible song. That was a #1 hit in England. This came out in 1980, this first album. Burn It Down's incredible. Tell Me When My Light Turns Green. Definitely a band worth checking out because there's so much more than Come On Eileen. That's their first album, and that's the CD of their first album. And this is, of course, the album that Come On Eileen came off of. But there are a lot of great songs on here. Jackie Wilson Said, Plan B, Show Me, Let's Get This Straight. So there's other songs on here that are just as good or better than the famous Come On Eileen. And that was a 1982 album, and that was a big hit and the #1 song all over the world. They didn't release another album until 1985, by which time everybody pretty much had forgotten about them. So this album came out. This is Don't Stand Me Down from 1985. Came out, Sunk Without a Trace, did nothing. It's a crying shame because this is a 10-star album all the way. This is probably their best album, even though these two are pretty incredible too. But just a brilliant, wonderful album that unfortunately didn't get heard by very many people and didn't do anything. This is out of print in the U.S., and I think it's out of print in England now too. They have re-released the CD a few times over the years, but it's out of print even in England. And I don't have a vinyl copy. This is actually a CDR that somebody from England made me a copy and sent it to me about 10 years ago. So I don't even have a proper CD of it. I'd like to get. I need to get a vinyl copy, but it's worth looking up. And This Is What She's Like, National Pride, I Love You, Listen to This, Reminisce Part 1, The Way You Look Tonight. Just one of the great lost albums of all time, and one of maybe like the third or fourth best album of the 80s, and just an incredible album. So I wish I had extra copies of these because I would really like to send these to you, Adam, because I think you would like this band. I know you're familiar with Come On Eileen, but I think you would really love this band, and it'd be interesting to see what your take and opinion on Dexys Midnight Runners are if you got to listen to some of their other stuff. And maybe you have these records, I don't know, but if you don't, I think you would really like them. So next up is the Cars, and I don't have any Cars albums anymore, unfortunately, but I do have all their albums on my iPod. But and of course their first two albums, the Cars and Candy-O, came out in, what was it, 78 and 79, I believe. But their first album in the 80s, Panorama, was kind of a weird album. It's kind of their forgotten album, but it had the song Touch and Go, which was the hit. But Candy-O was 81. Just love that album. And that's I was looking at the track listing on it before I made the video, and I realized that's one of those perfect albums. There's not a bad song on that album. So without going into their two '80s albums or the two '70s albums, which have some great songs. I love that. Was that Shooby Doo, and then it goes into Candy-O. I love that transition, and that would have been great for that snippet contest I did a while back. Now that I think of it, but yeah, Candy-O and Cruiser, Victim of Love, and of course, Heartbreak City with Drive and Magic, and so just a great band. And I guess Rick Ocasek was the main singer on most of those songs. I think Ben Orr is the actual lead singer on Drive, but most of the songs are Rick Ocasek, so I will go with him. Number 6, I've got Elvis Costello, who of course also made albums starting in the late 70s, 77 or so, and he made albums. He still makes albums today, but of his 80s albums, Good Year for the Roses, Off Almost Blue, Shipbuilding, and Every Day I Write the Book would probably be my favorite 80s song of Elvis's. From Punch the Clock is the album. And lastly, The Clash, who also had albums in the 70s, and of course there's the debate over whether London Calling is a 70s or an 80s album, because it came out in England in December of '79 and it came out in America I think in January of 1980. One of the greatest albums of all time, but I'll leave that out of the mix. Combat Rock, a lot of people said that's when the Clash sold out and all, which I don't care. I still love Rock the Casbah and Should I Stay or Should I Go. This is from 1980. I believe actually came out in '81, but I think, anyway, triple album, Sandinista. It's a big old mess. It's kind of like the White Album. It's just everything in the kitchen sink thrown in. There's some great stuff on here. There's some stuff on here that kind of makes you scratch your head. But the Magnificent Seven, incredible. Hitsville, UK, Ivan Meets G.I. Joe. What's that? The one song I really like on Police on My Back. The Call Up is incredible. Charlie Don't Surf, I love that one. And Career Opportunities, which was on their first album. This is a version that's sung by a choir of little kids, which a lot of people think is silly, but I think it's kind of fun. It's kind of funny. They've got a song called Let's Go Crazy 2, which Prince would have on Purple Rain 3 or 4 years later. Prince's version is a lot better, and it's not the same song. It's two different songs, just had the same title. So that's what I got, Adam, and hope you get a lot more subscriptions, and it's always good to check in and say hi to you. Best of luck, and did I forget anything? I don't think so. Pretty in Pink I mentioned that. I like that song by Psychedelic Furs. Duran Duran, I like a couple of their songs. There's some of them I don't like, but was it New Moon on Monday and The Reflex? I like those a lot. I don't know that I would consider Simon Le Bon or whoever the singer was one of my favorite singers, but I liked a couple of their songs, so I'm rambling. Have a good one, Adam. Congratulations on your subs.